make some sense of it all, but I can see it makes no sense at all. Is it cool to go to sleep on the floor? 'Cause I don't think that I can take anymore. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Monday, January 5th, 2026. And holy smoke, the world is still changing at a breakneck pace. Donald Trump is talking to reporters he's on airplanes and Air Force One, doing scrums and things like that, talking about Cuba, talking about Venezuela fallout. Rubio's doing scrums, talking about oil. We don't need their oil. We don't want their oil. It's going to take a lot of money to get their oil back flowing, but we are committed to doing that. So that's interesting, right? And they are also talking at length about how they want successful countries around them, and they will not tolerate Chinese interference, Chinese money, Chinese clout in the Western Hemisphere. And do you know what I thought about when he said that? I thought, we're in the Western Hemisphere? So, hey, that's going to be interesting. We're going to be talking about all of that stuff because, as I've said, and as I've been trying to make the case, this is about a lot more than Trump's ego. This is about a lot more than Venezuela as a country itself. There's more things going on, more places touch Venezuela and like China, and the deep state and voting machines and rigged elections. And it's all kind of being put on show. And I think people are going to see this show and think to themselves, holy smoke, we might be also impacted by these criminals. Maybe we should look at the prime minister who was recently placed in a rigged election, just like they're talking about here. So we'll look at all of that. Foreign registry watered down by Tamil Tiger. What's his name? Freeland was appointed as an advisor on economic development in Ukraine by Zelensky. So I'm shocked. I'm not that shocked. UK jailing thought criminals longer than rapists. Again, I'm shocked. I'm not shocked. And Tim Walz, we've got an update on his re-election campaign. And Trump is just on an absolute tear. And that's what I was talking about at the top. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, Joel. And one of the things that I think it's important to understand is that at one point, Venezuela was a very, very successful country. And that successful country got destroyed by communists. And the communists are hungry and they want to expand. And after they took over Venezuela, they thought, why not take over the United States? This is a history of Venezuela very quickly, just to give you a taste of how quickly and easily things can turn. And my goodness, it feels like Canada's in that turn right now. Joe says, I was going to say Joel, but I think it's Joe. Joe says, it's very important to know the history of Venezuela and why this action today is so important. In 1989, Caracas exploded into protests, riots, and looting. Somewhere between an estimated few hundred to 3,000 people were killed, mostly at the hands of a brutal crackdown by government security forces. It was a surprise to all of us, said Francisco Rodriguez, chief economist with Torino Economics, who was a college student at the time in Caracas. The Venezuela in which I grew up was a very confident nation, and it trusted its democracy, kind of like Canada now, but we shouldn't because our elections are rigged. And it valued its democratic system. We all thought that this was a very stable system. Remind you of anybody? It had been a democracy since 1958. So during the period of 1970, where almost all of Latin America was in military dictatorship, Venezuela democracy had survived. Venezuela was also rich, very rich, the wealthiest nation in Latin America. And so Venezuela, with the world's largest oil reserves, hummed along. Venezuela wasn't just a democracy and the wealthiest nation in Latin America. Venezuela also had the largest oil reserves in the world. That is key. Anybody remember what was happening in the early 1970s? The U.S. was going off the gold standard and setting up the petrodollar deal with Saudi Arabia in order to control the world's oil supply and force the world to purchase fiat dollars, greenback, or world reserve currency, which gives the United States a huge amount of power. Venezuela had to be destroyed. How did they do it? George H.W. Bush installed a puppet president in a fraudulent election back in 1974. So again, this is Canada's following the same pathway. It seems like it's a communist plot rolled out by puppets or influential people who want to take out another nation. And so you put in a dictatorship government, or you put in a puppet government who squanders the money, doesn't do anything proper, and the nation falls into disrepair and despair and can't do anything to get out of it, and now they're no longer an economic threat. They're no threat at all. The president, back to this, George W. Bush installed a puppet president in a fraudulent election back in 1974. The president then began to squander all of Venezuela's wealth through corruption and graft. Money was flowing out of Venezuela and into foreign bank accounts. The same playbook was used by George H.W. Bush and the CIA to take control of central banks. Sorry, I've got to mute this, otherwise it's going to bother me. And it will bother you as well. So, okay, there we go. The same playbook was used by George W. Bush and the CIA to take control of Central America in order to create the free flow of illegal drugs into America. Here's my Substack article on the subject. During that time, George H.W. Bush's puppet was installed as a president. Jeb Bush went to Venezuela to set up the CIA banking system in order to traffic drugs into America. That's not a coincidence. Then guess what this installed president did? Perez nationalized the oil industry in Venezuela. Why was that a huge deal? That immediately made Venezuela's oil industry centralized and easier to control. It primed Venezuela for collapse. In 1985, Saudi Arabia massively increased oil production from 2 million barrels to 5 million barrels per day. That caused the price of oil to collapse to under $20 a barrel. That price drop put the Venezuela government in a massive debt because they were dependent solely on the oil revenues. That forced Perez to go begging to the IMF for a big loan, right? The more mismanaged Canada is, the more in debt we become, the more likely an IMF loan is possible. And so we're on the same track, which put the country in even more debt and began the decline into poverty. Venezuela was never the same after that. No more competition for oil. Cabal destroys another wealthy country. It becomes a CIA proxy state like Iran, like North Korea, like I was talking about yesterday in the Kitchen Table Talk. If you want some more background on the Bush family connections to the destruction of Venezuela, here's the article, blah, blah, blah. So it's interesting to know the history. And Farm Girl says, Venezuela was a prosperous nation before the communists took over. May it now return to peace and prosperity. Fingers crossed, right? Fingers crossed. An American like Guam, or will it be its own country? Here's Marco Rubio talking about, I don't care what the United Nations says. This is the Monroe Doctrine in action. Here we go.
No, you're wrong in your question. Number one, Venezuela is a major source. And the reason why is the following. And I've seen a lot of this reporting, and it's fake reporting, and I'll tell you why. It says that somehow Venezuela is not involved in the drug trade because the UN says they're not involved in the drug. I don't care what the UN says. The UN doesn't know what they're talking about. Maduro is indicted by a grand jury in the Southern District of New York. That means the Southern District of New York presented the evidence to a grand jury, and a grand jury indicted him. And then a superseding indictment came out that was unsealed about a year and a half ago that specifically detailed Maduro's actions. So number one, let there be no doubt, Nicolas Maduro is an indicted drug trafficker in the United States, and he's a fugitive of American justice.
There you go. And so Marco Rubio is saying there's strong legal footing on this, and things that other people maybe aren't reporting on, but yeah, it seems like there was a deal made. They went in, and there was somebody who sold out Maduro in his own inner circle, maybe? I'm not sure exactly, but negotiations are ongoing with that person who sold him out, according to the announcement yesterday. Spectator Index says Macron, the president of France, says France does not approve of the methods that the U.S. used to capture Maduro. Nobody cares. Absolutely nobody. Oh, you don't like it, Macron? Nobody cares. Here's Marco Rubio to say nobody cares. Here he is.
I don't think that the European Union gets to determine what international law is. They certainly don't get to determine is how the United States defends its national security. The United States is under attack from organized criminal narco-terrorists in our hemisphere, and the president is responding in the defense of our country. I do find it interesting that all these countries want us to send, and supply, for example, nuclear-capable Tomahawk missiles to defend Europe. But when the United States positions aircraft carriers in our hemisphere where we live, somehow that's a problem. So I would say that the United States is, and this president has made very clear, his job is to protect the United States from threats against the United States, and that is what he's doing in this operation. I don't think that...
Right? He makes a good point. So they want nuclear Tomahawk missiles for Ukraine. But if I park an aircraft carrier in my hemisphere, the United States says, that's a problem for you? Huh, weird. Super duper weird. Right. Brittany says every half a million barrels of oil output from Venezuela will cost $20 to $50 billion, of investment. Currently, output is millions of barrels a day, and it would take a minimum a decade to double that output. And so this is one person who's got this take, but there's a bunch of people who are talking about this. Brittany's sharing a Sky News report on this. Here we go.
Trump says US oil companies will spend billions to reverse the decline in Venezuelan production, but it will not happen overnight. Venezuela's infrastructure has declined through a lack of investment and neglect. And there's been a brain drain too from the domestic industry under Maduro. Consultants Wood Mackenzie estimate that every additional 500,000 barrels of output will need $15 to $20 billion of investment. The more immediate question is what impact regime change in Venezuela will have on the oil price when markets reopen, particularly given the uncertainty over who is really in charge in Caracas.
The oil prices went down. So, spoiler alert. Table Salt says, important update. I did more digging, and Alberta still has a very competitive product. Alberta is a well-oiled machine. I'll see myself out. Table Salt again says, great news for Alberta. The last known all-in cost of Venezuela Miri heavy crude purchased by the USA was $50, $46.49 per barrel. And so Alberta will be very competitive, and we're not going to be completely replaced by Venezuela. We don't need to panic yet, but we should probably get a pipeline deal done. But Carney's in charge, and you remember the history lesson from the beginning of the show? Well, he's not going to get a deal. He doesn't want a deal. Corey Morgan, unless he can attach a carbon tax to it, right, Danielle Smith? Corey Morgan is responding to the National Post. National Post says Venezuelan oil could put Canada out of business. No, says Corey. No, it can't. Let's get away from these panic buttons and have a realistic look at what Venezuela will offer to the world market in what kind of time frame and where world oil demand is going. I think it's very plausible that if the United States sets up shop, that people from Alberta might go down to Venezuela to help get things rolling down there. And that might be very lucrative. Might be, you might go down as a contractor, right? Have you seen Landman? I hope it doesn't jump the shark. It's been pretty good so far. Tokyo Rosie says, the U.S. invasion of Venezuela was about removing Russian and Chinese influence from the Western Hemisphere. We're in the Western Hemisphere. Here's Marco Rubio saying, we want successful countries around us. Marco Rubio, you're speaking my language, buddy. Here you go.
States need to take over the Venezuelan oil industry.
Well, we don't need to. First of all, let me go back up. We don't need Venezuela's oil. We have plenty of oil in the United States. What we're not going to allow is for the oil industry in Venezuela to be controlled by adversaries of the United States. You have to understand, why does China need their oil? Why does Russia need their oil? Why does Iran need their oil? They're not even in this continent. This is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live. And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be a base of operation for adversaries, competitors, and rivals of the United States.
Have specific oil
We
companies?
also want to see that oil and the proceeds from it. Hold on. We want to see the oil proceeds of that country benefit the people of Venezuela. Why have 8 million people left Venezuela? 8 million, the single largest mass migration probably in modern history, left Venezuela since 2014 because all the wealth of that country was stolen to the benefit of Maduro and his cronies in the regime, but not to the benefit of people of Venezuela. You know how destabilizing 8 million migrants is? The number one fear that Brazil has, that Colombia has, that all these countries in the region have about what's happening in Venezuela and our involvement is they're afraid of another mass migration event. That's what they fear. This is deeply destabilizing stuff. It's not going to continue to happen. They are not going to come from outside of our hemisphere, destabilize our region in our own backyard, and us have to pay the price for it. Not under President Trump.
This isn't about Venezuela. Okay, Venezuela was the base of the first thing that happened, but this isn't about Venezuela, only Venezuela, and this isn't ending with Maduro. There is more to come, I'm telling you. And I will show you in just a minute. The Colbesi, I'm getting that wrong. Letter says, there it is. Natural gas prices are down 6% just 15 minutes after futures opened for the first time since Maduro was captured. And oil prices are back below $57 a barrel and nearing their lowest level since 2021. In just about all major escalations of geopolitical tensions with oil-producing countries, energy prices typically rise. Why is it different this time? Because the USA is taking control of Venezuela and is set to bring more oil and natural gas supply to the market. The market knows that this weekend's events will ultimately result in the opposite of a slight supply disruption. The market is never wrong. The market can possibly be wrong sometimes, but I'm not a money guy, so don't listen to me. Disclosed TV says, take everything with a grain of salt, though. Disclosed TV says, Trump says U.S. is not in the business of nation building, but in the business of having countries around us that are viable and successful and where the oil is allowed to freely come out, because that's good. It gets the prices down. That's good for our country. Here we go.
Back in 2016, I remember your RNC speech, and you were saying that regime change and nation building.
Where?
When you were speaking at the RNC back in 2016,
Go ahead, what did I say?
you were criticizing regime change and nation building, the U.S. being involved in that. It seems obviously that your stance has changed on that. What led to that? And is the U.S. nation building now? Is that
This
what
isn't a country that's on the other side of the world. This isn't a country like where you have to travel 24 hours in an airplane. This is Venezuela. It's in our area. The Don Road Doctrine.
So is that what you would say, that we're in the business of nation building now?
We're in the business of having countries around us that are viable and successful, and where the oil is allowed to freely come out because that's good. It gets the prices down. That's good for our country. Now, we have a very sick neighbor. It's not a neighbor, but it's close to a neighbor, and that's Venezuela.
Back in 2016.
You do have a sick neighbor, sir. We're very sick up here. Disclose TV says, Trump says, it sounds good to me when asked whether there will be a U.S. operation on Colombia. Colombia is very sick too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States. He's not going to be doing that long, let me tell you. Just, I can't see the future, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to be limited.
Colombia is very sick too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States. And he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
What does that mean? He's not going to be doing it very long.
He's not doing it very long. He has cocaine mills and cocaine factories. He's not going to be doing it very long.
So there will be an operation by the U.S. in
It sounds
Colombia?
good to me.
Secretary Rubio mentioned Cuba
They
yesterday.
kill a lot of people, yeah.
Secretary Rubio mentioned Cuba yesterday in his remarks. Does the U.S. have a plan to do similar action in Cuba?
They survived because of Venezuela. Now they won't have that money coming in. They won't have the income coming in. A lot of Cubans were killed yesterday. You know that. A lot of Cubans were killed.
Do you know how many? Does the administration know?
But there was a lot of death on the other side. No death on our side. But there was a lot of death on the other side, unfortunately. But a lot of Cubans were killed yesterday, trying to protect him.
There's been protesters killed in Iran. You said we were locked and loaded, ready to go. What is the line there for when the U.S. is going to get involved in those protests?
We'll take a look. We're watching it very closely. If they start killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the United States.
Is that something?
Cuba, Colombia, Iran, right? And he didn't make any kind of, he said, oh yeah, they could get hit very hard by the United States. Colombia is run by a sick man. Cuba's ready to collapse because Venezuelan money is no longer flowing. Communist money from Venezuela to communist Cuba, it's not happening anymore. So money's going to put pressure. So what does the regime do? Is it still Castro? Raul Castro now, right? But what does that regime do? It's very old now. Is there any young blood? Are there a lot of enthusiastic communists ready to come up and take over the party? So interesting. This whole shift is very, very interesting. I've seen maps from Greenland through Canada, the United States, and down into South America, and it just has one flag, the United States flag, and it's got the USSA, the United Southern States of America, and then Canada's Guam. Sorry, Canada. And Greenland is Fortress Greenland, of course. So national security, you see. Finance a Lot says, President Trump says Cuba looked like it is ready to fall, and we have to do something with Mexico. Oh, right, Mexico is the one I left out there. He didn't say that on the audio I've showed there, but I wouldn't be surprised. Here's a Canadian that says, okay, well, you've got this laundry list of, South America. Have you noticed Canada, sir?
Hey, I'm just wondering, this message is for Donald Trump. Is there any way you can just come snatch Mark Carney? Asking for a friend.
If you're free, if you don't have anything to do. Oh, Colombia and Cuba and, yeah. Well, no, I can understand you're busy. It's fine. I'm sure we're fine. I'm sure we're fine. You're going to cancel the USMCA. Oh, right. Cool. Sounds good. Yikes. Clandestine says, over the years, the CIA created a vast global network of proxies and racketeering playgrounds via regime change and destabilization. Trump and his team now control the CIA. Do they? Fingers crossed, but do they? And if you do control the CIA, are you going to scatter it into a million pieces after you're done using it like Batman did at the end of The Dark Knight? No? Meaning Trump and his team have the deep state's network mapped out, maybe, and thus they know how to destroy it, maybe. I think that's where I think that that's what we have been witnessing with Iran, Hamas, ISIS, Ukraine, now Venezuela, all CIA deep state proxies that are being neutralized and returned to the people as a sovereign nation, free of CIA influence. One of the things that Marco Rubio said that I hope that he's not lying about, I hope that that plays out in the future, is we want the oil revenue to benefit the people of that country. It's not beneficial for the United States. It's going to cost the United States a lot of money, billions of dollars, to get Venezuela up and running. Although I don't think they're being nice about it. I think that they're looking at that and saying, we have the capital, and on the other side, we're going to make boatloads of money, right? And then the people who are critical of this will just highlight the boatloads of money that they're going to make and not talk about the risk that they're taking right now to set all that up. And that risk is big. And the boatloads of money they make, think about your cell phone contract or like electricity for your house. You pay that bill and it's a reasonable bill. You don't, most of the time, I mean, in Ontario, it's less reasonable. And I mean, the politicians who have destroyed our energy markets have a lot to do with our high energy bills. But you don't hate those people who provide that thing, right? Like, you're not like, oh, you darn capitalist, you. And so a lot of times people don't mind the people who took the risk to bring this great product to market to make boatloads of money. People are like, yeah, we love the product. We love electricity. Woo, lights on, lights off, computers on, computers off. We love it. You keep providing the electricity. We'll keep paying the bill. I don't think anybody has a problem with it, but these people position these capitalist pigs as capitalist pigs, and we're supposed to believe that communism is better. And the warmth, what is it? Mandini was talking about the warmth of collectivism, right? And everybody was sharing all of the people dying of communist. Every time communism is tried, it fails, right? So I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And so it's very, very interesting situation. And if we can destroy these things, hopefully we'll do it. He continues, he says, I also think Elon and Dodge played an important role of finding all the information and mapping out the network. Trump is destroying the global CIA deep state network that JFK tried to expose. This is what saving the world looks like. Plausible. It's bumpy. And the speed of things is picking up right now. It seems like the speed of, like, if something happens because of the pressure, the economic pressure that removing the money engine, Venezuela, from the equation will put on the other things, we're going to see things happen in Colombia, things happen in Cuba. And like, Canada's just sitting up here biding our time until the USMCA runs out. I have no idea, but we're going to see these things happen and it's going to seem absolutely crazy. But I think potentially that's the storm that was forecast, right? That Trump was talking about all those years ago. And I mean, you can hope, but I didn't know for sure. Luke says, if we're going to be taking countries, we might as well take Canada. The people there deserve liberation. Here's Trump talking about Greenland. He says, Greenland. Oh yeah, Greenland. Right, here we go.
We need Greenland for national security, not for minerals. We have so many sites for minerals and oil and everything. We have more oil than any other country in the world. We need Greenland for national security. And if you take a look at Greenland, you look up and down the coast, you have Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland.
Needs Greenland. Need it. We need it. We need it. I need to rule it to make sure everything's good. President Trump says every Somalian should be deported from America. So here's Trump saying all the Somalians, deport them all.
Because we don't want ships taken by Somalia pirates. But what they are doing is they're stealing money from the American taxpayer. And every one of them should be forced to leave this country, including Ilhan Omar, who's a total crook. And she's one of the leaders of it. Not the only, because she's not that smart.
It's fun when he calls people out. It's funny because he like directly to their face. Andy Lee says, responding to John Simpson, after the invasion of Venezuela and forcible regime change there, says John, it's hard to see what grounds the United States will have for criticizing China's takeover of Taiwan in the next couple of years. And Andy Lee says, actually, it's not hard at all. Taiwanese citizens didn't have their elections stolen by narco-terror dictator. Hope that keeps you out over there at the BBC and that you find your moral compass again someday. Yep. So, and Senator Husakis says the evidence has been clear for years that China has aligned with dictators in Central and South America. They've used Venezuela, Cuba, and others as a base to execute their attacks on North America. These attacks come in the form of drug trafficking, illegal immigration, money laundering, and perpetual campaign of misinformation against Western democracies. China's CCP, leading the way for Russia, Iran, and Turkey, have become a bloc active in trying to undermine Western democracy and our free societies. Democracies around the world are facing attacks that we haven't seen since